So welcome to our session 3. We might start with some questions first. So I'm just reaching for a pen for myself to take notes so that I don't forget. Okay, does anyone have any questions? You can actually type them or you can speak through the microphone. All right. So we might just go on. So has any one of you had a chance to have a look at this Session 3 PowerPoint? You may type or you may briefly yesterday. That's great. Anyone else? Okay. Well, that's exciting. That's really good. There are particular things I was going to ask you, and if you can use the mic, then it'd be best. But if you haven't got the mic, just please type. That's great too. I would like you to now think a little bit about your literacy portfolios that you have created for your assignment 1 and the relationship between your thoughts in that assignment and anything you have found on that PowerPoint that I have sent to you over the last week. Oh, I mean, that I have sent to you last week. Yes.
Fine, I wasn't sure if I'm using. That's great. I'm just wasn't sure it's for my phone, so I wasn't sure if it was going to work or not. Okay, thank you.
Well, that's it. So, does anyone want to make a link, express or suggest a link between whatever you have been writing in your assignment 1 and this PowerPoint that we will be talking about today? Note takers? Now, let me assure you first that in literacy we have some principles, but there is no finality. So you can just shoot and we'll see how we go with it. Hi, Eileen. A lot has changed, you're saying, is it linear, in the way we learn. Yes, I think that people started to reflect critically about what we've been doing in classes, and especially what people or what academic pedagogues and pedagogy nowadays wants to do desperately is to move away from this industrial age teaching model where we were basically molding people to be the same and act in the way that we believed they actually were responding in a way that assured education happened or learning happened. And now we want to actually think a bit more critically of what being literate means, being able to read and write means, and how can we actually be more understanding of people who are different, even if they came from your own house. I mean, many of you have children, and you know none of them is the same as the other. So this gets, the challenge of teachers gets bigger because our students are not just different, they also come from different ethnic backgrounds and cultural backgrounds and social backgrounds, and also they have different physiological organization. And as a result, we need to actually think a bit more critically, because we don't want to prove to our students that they can't read or can't write. We actually want for them to succeed according to their capacities. So yes, people started to be a little bit more opening up and reflective, rather than just pointing the finger at the student. So anyone else would like to make a comment about the assignment 1 and the reflections you made in your assignment, and maybe some thoughts you might have had when you looked at that PowerPoint that I sent to you for this session today? Okay. If you have an idea, please either interrupt me. I'm absolutely loving interruptions. So one thing I need to say, I love when you interrupt me because it actually makes me refocus on your questions and your thinking. And also you can either interrupt by talking or by typing. But I might just take you through thoughts. Now we don't have to cover everything today which is in this PowerPoint, but I would like to actually clarify some conceptual thinking that underpins the entire design of this PowerPoint. Do you have some questions about it? That has any sort of have any concepts come at you as relevant or as new, or have you seen anything striking about it, or anything that you agreed or disagreed with? Okay, Adele, everybody's reading. Adele says, all of the points you have made seem really great, as well as the PowerPoint, and I think it has changed the way I will teach from now on, although with preschool and early years of primary school, I think it is a little harder. Well, we will think about it. We will just need to think about it, because yes or no, we can just basically say according to our intuition or experience, but I think it's something to hold at the back of our mind and think for ourselves is, are these ideas in any way relevant to my context? And many of us will teach, not always in the same classes or ages. Some of us will today teach year 1, year 2, year 3, year 5, and sometimes we might find ourselves in preschool. People shift all the time, so let's think about it. Whatever we're doing, how does this resonate with you, and how is that relevant to your context? So as you see from the title page, I keep repeating Paulo Freire's idiom, which is world, word, and world. So we've discussed it many times in our previous sessions. I don't have to refer to it. And now basically what I would like to do is start making you think about how to work with the curriculum. Because sometimes, and it is actually quite a known phenomenon, that teachers, doesn't matter whether they're pre-service or actually in-service, very often have a difficulty thinking critically or engaging critically with the curriculum. And as a result, we often blame the curriculum, but the curriculum is just a guide. It's just a reference page, and we need to learn how to work with it. Now, what I'm suggesting in this PowerPoint is that we can't work with the curriculum until we have a pretty good understanding of what is it that we're actually about. When we come to the literacy classroom and we want to teach, we have to have some big picture in our mind. And big picture will derive from particular understandings, not necessarily from an item B on outcome somewhere in the curriculum which says recognize different letters. Right? That comes, obviously, that will come, but it has to be contextualized, and that context is generated by our big picture. So what big picture can we have so that it can then create conditions for students to connect the lower order skills with the higher order skills? So yes, they can differentiate between A and B, and yes, they can actually write in an increasingly better way, but they learn it not as a separate skill, but they learn it as a skill that they use for purposes, for a particular purpose. Yes. Stacy, curriculum is daunting, but try to position yourself on top of it. You are always in command of it, not underneath it. So we will have other sessions where I will show you examples how to actually work with a curriculum like at the practical level. But today we will discuss concepts, the big picture of where it actually fits. So what's the relationship between the big picture and the curriculum? So let us just start covering up. So what we will do today, that's exactly what we will do today, I have just explained. And remember also that there are a number of things. There's a number of things. I just have a look what I have here. There's a number of things that I will cover today, but as you can see on this slide, which is visible now on your screen, I have a number of things here, higher order skills, and then some questions that I have created, but later on I found them in John Dewey as well. What people do, why people do these things, and all of that. Now, you have seen it. So what you will see, I am trying to create a way for us to think about literacy that keeps reminding us that literacy is about communication. This PowerPoint I wrote in a particular, I used the application PowerPoint. Why did I use the application of the PowerPoint, right? Because I wanted to communicate with you today and with other students of campus. PowerPoint seems like a suitable application. It allows me for flexibility, a large flexibility in the way I actually organize information on it. It has a nice presentation, right? So you can see that I use my literacy skills not as read and write, but as making decisions to suit a particular purpose. And the purpose was not to give you presentation, but the purpose was, what can I do to increase clarity in my communication with you? You can see it's much higher. It's not as low as I want to write a text for you to read. It's not as low as I need to use PowerPoint because everybody does it. I actually made an informed selection. The kinds of applications we have for delivering content, and also so I considered the application of the LearnLine, and also I considered what systems are out there that will enable me to communicate with you in a way that to my satisfaction, for the best impact. So literacy now is about communicating, and I want us now to think about the design that I suggested for classrooms, for running classes, as a design which is based in theory of communication. Actually it is. It is based in theory of communication. It looks very simple, but the theory of communication actually doesn't have to be very complex. What it does have to have, however, is particular pointers to what makes communication effective. So I kept it quite simple, but sufficient enough to actually design an entire unit of work. Unit of work, which means a sequence of lessons going for a period of time, so that actually students can learn something from it. Now, other than having a design of a literacy class, which is based in communication theory, or in the concept of communication, because literacy is about communication, other things that I considered in this design and didn't explore it enough because it's not the time yet, this is just our first conceptual lesson, is ways of providing tools, either through activities or through different tools, that enable students to explore how things work, but on their terms. You see, we will have in our classrooms, we will have children who are dyslexic, but dyslexia doesn't mean that they can't organize information. It means they organize differently. And I've been thinking about it for the purpose of my own project that I will start in January, and I will run an experimental group teaching project with 2 schools in Darwin in July. And I've been thinking quite a lot about dyslexia. And you can think of children, they are said, dyslexic children are said that they have problems with organization, not just with reading and writing actually, they organize very differently. So for example, dyslexic children they have difficulties differentiating between male and female voices, and especially between voices of different females. So if you give children, dyslexic children, the voice of the mother and the sister and an aunt, the recent MIT research, Massachusetts Institute of Technology in America, one of the sandstone universities in America, has just published research which said that basically children with dyslexia have difficulties with differentiating between different female voices or male voices. They just can't tell. So there's not a problem, because we need to stop thinking this way. They organize information differently, and what we expect them to see, they see differently. It's not that they don't see it. They see things. They don't bump into furniture, right? Dyslexic children don't walk into walls. They just see things differently. So we need to now think in our teaching of how can we diversify the teaching tools and activities we provide in classrooms so that kids can actually look at things differently, from different angles, in different ways, for different purposes, you see? That's why when I think about designing a lesson, a sequence of lesson plans, I'm thinking that part of it must be how can we allow children play so that they can experiment with their own thinking about the way they design their communicative actions. How can we increase tools for children to evaluate in more than one way the way they communicate? And by communicate I mean create text or read text, right? So these are all sort of things. These are the kinds of things I'm thinking about. This is the kind of big picture things I have in mind when I'm sitting here thinking, how can I share with you my thoughts about designing literacy classrooms or classes. Now, Adele wrote in her portfolio, she wrote something very worthwhile, and she said that during her primary school years in the 80s, the teacher was viewed as the primary knower whose role was to evaluate and validate students' responses to texts. Now, I thought to myself, well, intuitively and also now from our readings we know that that was in the past. But how do you think it looked? What kind of activities are in classrooms and possibly still practiced when the teacher puts himself or herself in the position of a knower? Can you think of some activities? What makes the teacher act this way? Pardon me. Can you think of examples that can show to us that the teacher is acting this way? Because we need some contrast. If we can actually identify situations where teachers act as primary knowers, then we can then reflect on what to do otherwise.
Are you talking about situations maybe where the teacher presents themselves as the head of the classroom or in a position of authority and you know, that they largely lead the conversation? I suppose that would be an example, wouldn't it? Where they are in that position and the students are all looking to them as the primary knower. Is it not?
Yes, and for example, can you think more of can we all think of teacher leading conversation? Exactly. Can we think of activities like that? What does the teacher actually do in a literacy context? Have you seen Or can you recall anything like that?
Writing on the boards up at the leading group discussion about something, and prescribing how a child should perhaps write their creative journal or their a recount or something like that. And they often give an example on the board, and in ways, I suppose, dictating and, I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, and if any of you of us who are here in this conversation, if you looked at my PowerPoint, and I know it's really a challenge to answer this question, but if prescription would be an undesirable behavior on the part of the teacher, what would be the alternative? So, in a sense, I come from Poland, and my mother always tells me a funny story about the neighbor who told her how to kill the mouse, while my mother was terrified looking at the mouse. You know, she said, "This is how you do it, this is how you do it, this is how you do it," and my mother was just about to die. So that kind of prescription, what would be the alternative, or an alternative?
Well, I suppose in that sort of situation, there's always got to be an element of prescription, but yeah, I don't know whether you invite more student input or what. There's always got to be an element, I think, a small element of prescription. I'm not really sure.
Okay, so hold on. So basically, evoke student input. Hold it there. And what did Lisa say? Reading books with their own expressions and how the teacher thinks the book should be expressed. Right, exactly. So basically, this is a kind of prescriptive behavior. I think Stacey, you hit the nail on the head. Is it how we say it in English? Because prescription, because we need to think now, this is what we don't want, so this is what we want. We don't want the teacher to hijack the meaning, right? So prescription would be basically, this is how you do it. This is how you kill a mouse. And then the alternative would be to engage, what you said, to evoke student input. This is really good, but I can push it further.
What you're doing to us right now, you're evoking our input right now. You're asking us the question. You're asking us to think for ourselves and give my idea might be completely different to Adele's or Linnea. So I guess that's what I'm.
Not only that, I'm doing more than that, and it's very important. I'm glad you asked. I'm doing more than that, which may not be visible because it's kind of hidden. So sure, I'm asking questions, that's for sure, but I've done other things. I've sent you a PowerPoint, so you have already some tool, but some other reference frame, not just me talking. And you also have an activity, which is the assignment 2. You see, there are 3 things in play.
Yes.
Something you have a purpose, that's the purpose, assignment 2. One form of discussion happened, which is your reflection by looking at the PowerPoint, and now we are discussing, thinking how we can actually tackle assignment 2 in relation to what it wants from us and what we already have collected. And also we have assignment 1. You've done assignment 1, which is your own involvement also in the issue. So actually we had a lot of input. We have PowerPoint, assignment 2, assignment 1, and now us talking about the thing. 4 things happen. It's very important that I raise it because sometimes, because we are talking, we think that I am evoking your input only through this discussion, but I actually was hoping to evoke your input through assignment 1, because assignment 1 will feed to your assignment 2. Assignment 2, the very fact that you have a question or challenge in assignment 2, that also is evoking your input. The PowerPoint I sent to you for reflection, for browsing, is also a way. So there are many, you can see that the environment, we started to actually have an environment for evoking your questions, your input.
Yes.
So you are scaffolding our learning, Adele asks. Now, this is a very early in your education, this unit, it's just level 2 unit. But I will just, because I have to be honest with myself intellectually, in a sense, Adele, you are right. but in a sense, I'll give you a different word that I like using. We're not actually, I would suggest, and you can think for yourself. So prescription is on the one hand, which is what we don't want, and the alternative would be to now enable children to evaluate for themselves. So prescription eliminates not just students' input, but eliminates their thinking about how to do things.
You need a balance then, really, between that, because...
Okay, so... Sorry. That's right. So can you keep that in mind, Stacey? And when we go through the PowerPoint, at least through some conceptual aspects of it, hold that thought. You need a balance. But the idea is that when students go into the world, they don't have a teacher. And they're not like monkeys, reproducing. Monkeys don't reproduce, but let's sort of proverbially. They will be evaluating. So rather than teach them that prescription is a way, is a tool, because the world is like the prescription says, what we give them is conditions for them to evaluate for themselves.
To learn for themselves.
Yeah. Right. So what we need to do is to create conditions that this happens.
Okay.
And it's complicated now. We give them tools to learn. Exactly, Adele. Yes, you need a balance. You need a balance. But in order to have a balance, it may not be that we need... Right, we'll hold on to this thought about balance. Balance is pretty good, because that's what it is. There will be information sharing, but we need to think of ways whereby we can share information about the world with children without necessarily hijacking the world and telling them this is how you do it, this is how it is. This is one of the examples I have seen of this kind of situation where the teacher was the primary knower. Was a teacher, was actually a lesson, was a lesson, I have to say it, I'm very sorry, because you probably had good comments about it. I was watching a person who teaches accelerated literacy, and she put herself in the position, she was teaching she was using the book The Lion and the Mouse. And we had one book, and the assumption was that if we can explain the lion, we can explain the mouse, we can explain the assumption was that the way how a 50-year-old thinks of what's happening, or 30, like my students, thinks of what's happening in the lion and the mouse, those concepts are accessible to a 6-year-old. But if you think to yourself how you thought, or how kids think of a mouse and all of these things, it's still not that cut clean. Things are pretty overlapping, and there could be a need for tools that enable children to compare and contrast meanings in order to create a richer understanding what belongs to one group and what belongs to another group, rather than this is mouse, this is lion, this is this, this is this, this is this, this is this. And I felt it was kind of like, so that's how I actually experienced that particular lesson I saw. Whether I was right or wrong doesn't matter. What we have established now, that the primary knower is the one who prescribes. And the alternative would be is the one who enables children to engage or to evaluate the situation and the tools for the best impact that they want to actually create. So evoking student input. We don't just evoke their input, we want them to use that input to as a reference point, as reference point for themselves to evaluate what should be, what is, how it could be, how could be different, right? So that's what Ockerman is doing. She's allowing children to evaluate. They are not just talking, they're evaluating. Is this the camel? Is this a donkey? Why is it a camel? Why is it a donkey? They evaluate. They could have actually looked into different types of resources to evaluate further and learn more, right? So children, we don't only evoke their input. We want them to engage in meaning making, which means engage in evaluating the information on the basis of the frames of references that they actually have available to them at the given point. And also then we might actually, through children discussion or through different other activities, we may actually help them to enrich those frames of reference. And this concept of enriching is a key concept in the way I teach literacy. Enrichment and expansion, it's so important. And you can actually relate to it, can you? Stacey, are you saying something?
No, sorry, I closed the book. I'll turn the talk off.
Okay, because you come up as a... All right. So basically, what I'm looking at is now students evaluating or evoking student input, but not just to talk, but actually to show us how they are working with frames of reference, how they are evaluating what's going on. And also our objective as teachers is to expand the frames of reference in relation to which they make those evaluations. So it's not to prescribe, but to enable them to expand the frames of reference in relation to which they make their evaluation. That's so important. Expand, we create activities and make tools available to enable children to expand their world. Okay, well, yeah?
I've just joined, Karen. I just want to know, have you gone through the key components in the assignment 2?
We're talking about assignment 2?
Yes, sir. The key components of the creating a resource of teaching leading. I sent you an email on it.
Oh, you have sent me an email, yes. I've seen that. Where is it? But I haven't had a chance to answer it yet because it was sent to me in the afternoon and I was at work. Look at it when I can actually focus on it and give it time as opposed to answer in a hurry.
Yeah, I just wanted you.
Okay, so what we have.
I just wanted you to go through the key components of assignment 2, like the definition of a teaching and learning context and all those other points.
They all have to be in the assignment 2, yes. Is it what you ask? I cannot hear you very clearly, but is this what you're asking? So the assignment 2 will have to have the lessons plans, but before that, it will have to have a justification.
So I think if I heard Sharon right, I think she was asking for you to go through the key components of the assignment and give them a bit more explanation. If that's right, Sharon?
Yes.
Okay. Well, can we just talk about lesson designs that I have in this PowerPoint, and then maybe we can. I don't have it loaded at this very moment, so going into it will take me a while to actually load it and look at it. But so basically if I can explain roughly, and then maybe for the next session I will just go point by point as the assignment 2 is described. But roughly speaking, we have to create a sequence of 5 lessons. What will be in them? How do you envisage to work with students within those lessons? and I expect that we will go into the very, very detail. Those 5 lessons have to be quite exhaustively presented. What kind of tools you will be using, what kind of activities you will construct, and what kind of maybe internet or other games, online games or internet-based games, or any computer games you might use, why those, how would you integrate them in the classes, and so on, and why. So the beginning of the assignment will need to have things like you are seeing already in this PowerPoint now, things like who are our students' objectives, pedagogy, and other things here already illustrated, right? So what I will expect from you is a rationale preceding the entire lesson design, saying to me what you think of pedagogy, and make references what made you think that this is the pedagogy that will be underpinning your lesson design. So you need to have a pedagogy. Each of the lessons, the entire lesson sequence, which I hope it will be a project that will have 5 different which will consist of a sequence of 5 lessons. The entire project needs to be justified in the curriculum in relation to higher and lower order skills. So an assignment that says we want children to understand particular linguistic feature without it being somehow integrated with higher order skills cannot be justified in relation to curriculum or pedagogy. So the way we work with the curriculum will have to be linked with pedagogical concepts, and they are about our students are critical participants in the knowledge society, which means they evaluate, they don't imitate or reproduce. They don't reproduce. If they reproduce, then they critically assess what to reproduce, which still makes them critical participants. So if they are critical participants, and if therefore the object of teaching is not to prescribe, but to support students in evaluating the ways in which they are in the world, or how they understand their own actions and the actions of others, then this critical and creative engagement will be the way in which you could refer in the curriculum to higher order skills. Critical assessment, creative engagement, creative expressions, and there will be other things like being in teams, resourcing the power of the greater community, and so on. So these are the higher order skills. And those skills will inform the objectives of your activities in your lesson, of a whole project, and also of activities that will be guiding your sequence. Lower order skills, and I will explain through this PowerPoint, are basically you then develop activities that enable students to actually complete those higher order skills of the assignment or of the whole project they engage in. And this is the purpose of this PowerPoint that I was trying to explain. But if you ask me this plainly, I might actually give this short introduction and then show you in detail how the PowerPoint is achieving it. But the lower order skills, which are outlined as outcomes in the curriculum, will be sources of your reference around which you may create support activities for students to actually see to actually see how well they are doing in relation to the higher order skills. So if let's, for argument's sake, if the lower order skill is to differentiate between letter A and B, for its own sake, this kind of skill has no value. But if it is to support students in making in telling the difference between Woolworths and post office, then there is a value. So somehow these lower order skills, like for example differentiating between different letters, need to be embedded in higher order tasks so that they can derive meaning and purpose, and children therefore can meaningfully engage those lower order skills, as opposed to be treated as it was the case in the past in the behavioral paradigm, where children just basically were requested to reproduce what the teacher gave them. And they were basically trained like little monkeys. You must do this, you must do this, and children reproduced, it was all good. But there was no guarantee that children then will be able to actually use those skills once they are in complex situations. I might just for a second read this text produced by someone. So Adele says, so who are our students? Do we make up a class? Yes, you do make up a class. Or do we discuss what we know about students in general? No, you make up a class. You make up a class. The challenge here is, and we are running well ahead of ourselves, because I wanted to raise these issues in another session, but the thing is, we often think that if we say that we have a few ESL students and we have a few indigenous students and we have a few dyslexic students, and that whether we include them or not, we think it will make a difference to the way we teach. In fact, as I said, we're running ahead of ourselves now, but since this question was raised, it needs to be answered. And the answer from me is, I would suggest, is we need to always think of inclusive learning models, ways or activities in which we act, in which we create increasingly inclusive conditions. This is very important because it is the assumption is that if we have an indigenous student, we have to be inclusive. But if we don't have indigenous students, we don't. We do, because everybody is different. If we do have indigenous students, then we should be accounting for Aboriginal communities and elders. But if we don't have indigenous students, we don't have to account for Aboriginal culture. We do. So, as you can see, please do make up a class, create your own, and describe the class. But be aware that the way you describe is always from a perspective, which means it doesn't capture the reality. It just tells a story, not the story about the class, just a story. So the description is important, but most important is not how you see them, but how inclusive, how critically you approach your own teaching, so that your teaching is as inclusive as possible at the given time that you can create. We are never perfect, but we have to be honest in ourselves and say, I made the best attempt. Okay, I might actually, Sharon, thank you for your question. I might just let it go at this very moment and go on with a description of the PowerPoint, because I just would like to cover what I want to cover, and maybe this is the question you might actually either ask at the end of our session, or you might be actually able to answer it to yourself after we finish this session, or you may raise it in the next session, because I'm just not able to actually get on with this PowerPoint, and maybe, as I said, this PowerPoint will actually clarify some questions. Okay, so where were we? So this is a particular thing that I want us to keep in mind, and this is very important. While it is slide 1 or slide 2 of this PowerPoint, it's absolutely critical, and that's why I was talking about it. We have teaching methods that are based on prescription. The teacher is the primary knower, and the teacher says, you know, what is the mouse? Yes, this is the mouse. What is the lion? This is the lion. And then this is how you do it. This is how you write. Tell me again, what does this word mean? How do you spell it? And so on. It's a very training-oriented and pushing students into a way of thinking that if they can do the text the way the teacher expects it, then they become literate. For as long as your teaching methodology did not engage students in an act of evaluation, in an act of contrast, comparison, then the teaching is more like training. It's more like relying on prescription rather than on engaging critical thinking skills and enabling children input, evoking children input, as said by Stacey. Evoking children input, but as I said again, we don't evoke children's input for its own sake. We evoke it in order for students to compare and contrast the frames of reference on which they bring into a communicative context, and we want now them to evaluate those, expand those frames of references through discussions, through other activities, and we need to think what they could be, so that our lesson expands their world, doesn't just teach them the difference between T and A. Okay, so this would be the most important part, I would say. To make these statements in your assignment would be very, very important, because it sets up a big picture of your thinking of what you are there for in the literacy class, in the literacy context. So these are particular questions that one needs to think: who are our students? What is the objective of your teaching? Is to engage in making informed evaluation. This idea of making informed evaluation is very important, because informed means not only on what they know today, but on what you enabled them to consider, which is beyond what they know today. And that's part of literacy teaching, right? Expanding their world, expanding their frames of reference. Now you will hear that I very often use the same phrases like expansion, or expansion of the frames of reference. It took me years to work out those phrases. I know it sounds simple and it's easy for you, but these were the sort of phrases that turned out very helpful in my own academic work. And that's what we want children to do, is to actually come out with bigger heads and with more critically informed heads. Pedagogy is about facilitating tools to enable this objective. So we facilitate tools for children to learn to think critically, to evaluate, because they are critical participants. You see? It's all connected. The point, who are the students, the objective, and the pedagogy are all linked together. We facilitate tools enabling students to evaluate, because that's the objective of our teaching. And evaluation is what critical people do. Critical people can evaluate. But it is critical, the outcome of your criticism will depend on your information. So if you know little, your evaluation will be narrow. If you know more, your evaluation will be informed. Right? So that's why we need to. That's why the word expansion comes into discourses. So the critical participants, they need to engage in critically evaluating what they think and how they act, and we need to create conditions and give them tools to do so in an expansive way. Any questions on this particular slide at this very moment? Okay. But you see what I'm doing now, I'm giving you these first slides for your assignment 2, where we actually discuss pedagogy. And a lot of text will be actually talking about the things that I'm pointing out now. Now your PowerPoint, I envisage that you will create your assignment 2 either online or in PowerPoint. It doesn't matter in what form, but they don't have to be lengthy, those preceding discussions about pedagogy, or but they need to have the critical pointers. All right. So now how we're working with curriculum. It's very, very important now that so first of all, we have particular skills, curricula, Pedagogies, ways of teaching, yes. Pedagogy. Pedagogy is the way of teaching, yes. It's a teaching approach. Pedagogy is a teaching approach. And each teaching approach must contain particular elements like whom are we teaching, what are we teaching, and why, and to what end. So whom are we teaching? Students who are critical participants. What are we teaching? Evaluation. To what end? Critical participants. So that they, what we teaching. So who? Pardon me. Who are they? Critical participants, right? What are we teaching? Evaluating. So that they actually evaluating. And to what end? So that they act on an informed basis. Right? So critical participant, we teach them to evaluate so that they act on an increasingly informed basis. So that's a full definition of pedagogy. We want models of teaching that encompass the way in which we conceptualize our students, the objectives of teaching, our students, what we teach, and for what purpose. These are the three key elements of any model of pedagogy. So you have it here. Now you will see that in pedagogy here, I have put things like what people do, why do they do that, and how people do that. Now, do you know why in the context of literacy teaching, I have put these three questions? Did you work out what they actually are all about? What do you think? You can guess. Why did I come up with those? Why did I come up with those elements at all? Why didn't I say higher order skills and then activity? You can see that I don't have the word activity as such here. I have more things happening in this slide. But before we go further down, so who are students? They're critical participants, objectives, we want them to be critical, creative, and there are other things, team builders, able to resource the broader community intelligence, and things like that. So basically people who can live with people in an informed and inspiring way. So pedagogy, why do I have in pedagogy all these questions? What people do, why do they do, what do you think? What do these questions represent to you? Can you relate to them? They basically questions. Is anybody hearing me? All of a sudden everybody is very quiet. I'm not sure if I'm actually heard. So these are basically questions that come from communication theory. We need to know, the agent, the purpose, and the ways by which people do that. Yes, thank you, Adele. So basically, the reason why I want these questions, and again, it took me years to invent them, or at least some time, is to help teachers. Yes, okay. It's to help teachers to identify pointers around which they can actually construct their lessons. And the reason why I don't jump from higher order skills to activities like whatever, playing a game or building an aeroplane or writing a letter, is because I want us to have some structure that allows us as teachers to start thinking about what is happening in a communicative act. If literacy is about communication and selecting best tools, linguistic and other, multimedia and other, and different objects through which we actually deliver our communication. So if literacy is about learning to communicate with appropriate tools, with the use of tools that are most suitable for a given situation, then wouldn't it be nice to actually have some points of focus for designing our lessons that actually are based in communication? Now, we can think of those questions in many different ways, but one of the things that I wanted to do is for you to be aware that children, when you have children in literacy classes, you have children that come with different understandings of the world in their heads. Some of them don't know that you can send a letter via post office. Some of them don't know you can send a letter via email. Some of them don't know that you can actually write a letter at all. Some of them don't know that people actually write. Some of them, they don't understand that people have to, you see what I'm saying? Some of the children may think that only men write. Some children may think that only adults write. I mean, kids come into the classes with all kinds of ideas in their heads. They are not just cultural or sociologically based, they're just their own. I mean, when I think what I used to have in my head when I was little, I mean, my world was amazing. And I don't think it ever finished, but you see what I'm saying? As teachers, we don't just, if we teach to communicate with appropriate tools in appropriate ways, we need to actually contextualize those acts of communication. One way of contextualizing is to actually introduce the context in which people communicate, and one of the ways is to actually engage children. So when we create our lesson 1, we might actually think of how can we actually engage those children in learning about particular things. So for example, we might show them what texts do or what people do. Now in this particular, pardon me, erase what I just said in the last sentence. So in the first lesson, the engagement might be structured around the concept of what people do. And you don't have to do it as I designed in this particular lesson example in this PowerPoint. But what people do would be nice, you know, and what kinds of people? Children, girls, little children write poems, big children write poems, girls write poems. Very important. Then good thing would be to also in another lesson to explore why people do that. You might also do it in the same lesson. So why people do it? Why do people write poems? Why do people send letters? Why do people do whatever you have shown them that people do in the lesson 1 or in some earlier activity? Why do people do that? Right? It contextualizes the act of communication. It allows children to think, oh, this is why they do it. I never knew they do it for that reason. Not only I didn't know that they were doing this, I had no idea why. And then you can move to how. For children to observe and have a look, and then later on in some later phases of the lesson sequence that you will actually design, you can go into further detail of how to do these things as children work on their own projects. Right? But you can see, we were talking earlier about balance between prescription and evaluation. You can see that when children evaluate or learn how people do particular things, they might evaluate against a broader range of examples. And in that way, they compare and contrast. Oh, this is how you write the letter to, this is how the letter in email looks like, and this is how the letter that you send via post office looks like. But not every letter that you send through post office has pages. Sometimes it's just a greetings card. Oh. And it looks differently. And it's shorter, typically, unless someone else writes it wrong. You see what I'm saying? So some of our lessons can be constructed just along these points. These points can be repeated because you go, as you engage children, you can go further down and explore what people do in greater detail. The letter, then an email letter, then an email letter to a friend, and an email letter to a friend who lives next door. Never mind. The point really, which I wanted to make, that these, what people do, why people do that, and how people do that, are focus points which enable the teacher to structure lessons in a way that contextualizes communication acts. And as a result, it doesn't just contextualize, it includes an element of expansion. Right? It includes an element of expansions. Children learn what people do, children learn why people do that, and children learn how people do that. Now you can read for yourselves these things here. It's just too detailed for me to read now. But how do we work with curriculum here? The curriculum applies to the top layer where we actually have we have to be aware of different higher order skills that curriculum mentions and sometimes doesn't mention. I think not every national curriculum might be sometimes mentioning something, sometimes another things, but basically things like critical, creative, and team building, and able to actually resource the broader community intelligence, they are always there, which means act with information and serve people and serve through interacting with people. So you have, in the curriculum, you have your higher order skills. So any activity or any project around which you structure your 5 lessons or 6 lessons, I don't know why someone in this particular assignment too, whoever wrote the assignment, focus on 5 lessons, but 5 lessons will do. So if you write a sequence of 5 lessons, you structure it around a particular project, and that project has to be hooked onto those higher order skills. Because if it doesn't make room for students to engage those higher order skills, it is not consistent with the curriculum. Now, once you have a particular project that you design, and it may actually take you a while because sometimes you may see it's too narrow or too broad, then for each lesson, what people do, you might actually here at this level explore the curriculum and its outcomes and see how many things are there in the curriculum that you could engage in the activities that you will make available for students in your lesson. How many things are there in the outcomes specified in the curriculum that you can draw upon in order to create activities in your lessons? Now, one point I really want to make clear. Sometimes teachers just think that if they use 1 or 2 outcomes, that's what they will draw students towards. What I suggest is you explore different outcomes, because those outcomes will inform your activities, but the activities are not designed to draw students towards them. They are designed in order for students to explore how things work. Can you hear the difference? Traditionally, we say, well, we will now make children learn about rhymes. Well, it's very well done, but a person cannot see the green unless they saw also brown and red and blue. So the idea is now to look for your lesson 1. So your lesson 1 will be constructed towards a particular focus that, say, for example, just in this explanation, we might actually think that the lesson one will be what people do. Actually, the way I designed it is a bit different, but for argument's sake, if you design your lesson one just to engage children in playing and exploring particular things that people do, but link with the theme of the project around which the 5 lessons are designed, then you look into the curriculum right here and you look for information around, especially in the outcomes. You look for the information in the outcomes for clues about what kinds of activities you could create by looking at those outcomes that will enable children to explore what people do through comparing and contrasting, and therefore expanding text as an emotion. So text as emotion is the kind of thing that I have designed my lessons around. But you could do anything else. So the project around which you structure the 5 lessons must be big enough to allow for activities of evaluation, creativity, working in teams, and resourcing information. So that's how large has to be an activity. So students need to create something, and in order to create, they will have to evaluate. And in order to create and evaluate, they should somehow, one way or another, engage other students, and maybe look for information elsewhere, right? So that's the higher order skill. So the 5 lessons are around the project, which actually enables students to do that. Lower order skills, you draw from the curriculum, and for each lesson, you explore the curriculum, what it enables, for each lesson you explore the curriculum in relation to the kinds of activities that you can create for particular outcomes to be achieved. And we create more, this is a different way of teaching a little bit because it's an exploratory learning environment. And we will make sure that students can actually choose the activities they engage in according to their questions. So in that sense, you create more so that kids can select according to their questions rather than a prescriptive activity, if I can put it this way for contrast. The curriculum is a reference guide for us to create activities in order for children to engage in those activities, to compare and contrast, and engage in evaluative behavior so that the things they create are created on an informed basis. That's pretty much the relationship between higher and lower order skills. Any questions, Sharon?
No, I know. I'm not just going on one step. No.
So what happens now, when your lower order skills are informing activities that are linked to the focus of the lesson, like what people do, and the focus of the lesson is linked to the theme of the entire sequence, then you can see that everything everything are different aspects of communication that you actually make available for students to engage in order to engage in the communicative behavior. Everything is linked. So the lower order skill is utilized for students to compare and contrast for the purpose of engaging in a particular project. And therefore, this act of comparing and contrasting will have a meaning, for them. But if we, for the whole lesson, teach them the difference between W and H, and W and some other letter, then they are learning this for the sake of just knowing the difference. It is not communication, it's just differentiation. that we teach. And when we do that, when we don't teach communication, but just play only at the lower end of the scale, which is with those lower order skills, what happens? We don't engage the right brain with the left brain. The bridge, we don't create the bridge, which means we don't draw on what students already know. All our students, dyslexic or not, by the time they are in kindy or by the time they are in primary school, they can communicate. They can tell jokes. They can insult people. They can please people. They have communication skills. They know everything about communication. So why not draw on it and put literacy lamp that we create here on the bottom here of the left hemisphere? Why not link the right hemisphere with this that develops for the purpose of actually make communication better? And very often people in literacy research don't create this communication, that link between communication and literacy. And as a result, they have this problem which they call children don't read for comprehension. They don't read for comprehension because there is no such a thing like reading for comprehension. All it is reading towards a purpose. If children have a purpose to read, they read for comprehension. If the only purpose is read because I asked you, why would they be reading for comprehension? They comprehended that they have to read because you asked them, so they comprehended the goal is to please you, not to actually get stuff out of the text. You see the difference? So that's why we have to have these communication-based questions. On the one hand, they expand children's thinking about Communication Act, but on the other hand, they also orient literacy skills, like differentiation between letters, differentiation between what to use when, differentiation between a number of lower order skills, but they are actually, in those lower order skills are engaged for the purpose of communication. And in that sense, literacy teaching is actually communication teaching, and as a result, enables children to build on what they know, makes it more meaningful for them. So, for example, I did something funny here. Now, you will see in this model we have a project, so the lesson sequence is organized around the project. We have those three pointers around which we can structure our lessons, these 3 questions. And notice that every lesson has to finish on a high point. This is called achievement, right? Each lesson has to be finished in such a way that children go, yes, we know, yes, we have learned something, yes, we know what to do next, right? Some sort of excitement, some sort of achievement. Because there's a saying that nothing succeeds like success, but also nothing fails like failure. It's a corollary. But yes, nothing succeeds like success. So we want children to actually, when they finish a moment with us, to feel like, yes, we know what to do next. So you can see here this what, why, and how are aspects of communication. What people do, why people do, and how people do it, right? So because they are aspects of communication, therefore the link between the project that children do and how we teach them or help them to engage in that project is linked with communication, and therefore the link between literacy and communication is preserved or is established, rather than teaching literacy for the sake of differentiating between phonemes or differentiating between syllables and all of those exercises which are abstract. Literacy is a very practical skill, and it's for the purpose of communication. So there. You can organize your lessons, your 5 lessons, in many different ways. I have at this very moment here, for the purpose of the example I am suggesting here, it's an overview of an example. It's a very sort of quick. I have the lesson 1 has all the 3 elements: what people do, why, and how. Then actually the second picture will show you this better. So the lesson 1 is what people do, why, and how. The lesson 2 is why people, so I focus more on why people do and how. The third lesson is on how people do that. And lesson 4 will be how the students doing now their own projects. So the first one is kind of, even though I call them engagement, exploration, evaluation, the lesson 1 and 2 and 3, the way I suggested here in this plan, are basically about engaging children, exploring, engaging, testing, and then getting them to the point that they are actually able to, or wanting to do something on their own. I will run you through it just a little bit. We've got only 5 minutes left. 3A's. Yes, Sharon, how do you know? You must have done some teaching with me before. Yes, they are 3A's, but I'm just not going to mention them here because it is just too much information. You can look at this PowerPoint for yourselves. I will deal with aspects of it next time. Engagement. What people do, why people do that, and how people do that. Okay, well, let's have a look. So the achievement here is children explore what people do, why, and how, and decide on their project. So after having looked at what people do, why, and how, people go, yeah, we want to do that, we would like to do that, we know how to do that. Well, of course they don't, but they are getting excited. That's the idea, right? You want them on your side, you want them screaming out of enjoyment. So I put this slide here. Let's run through it. We don't have much time. But what people do, well, let's have a look what people do. You could actually start even with a silly online game. I'm sure some of you know it, which is, this is just, this girl is dancing and kids have to choose which one is An, San, Ban, all of those things. This is not the first literacy class you would have. This would be with children probably 6, 7-year-old, right? But the idea here is to bring in a game which actually, where speech is used, where there's fun, and where the level of I don't want to call it difficulty, but the level of complexity is minimized. It gets people warmed up and so on. And then even with small children, you can say why people do that, why people have this An, San, Ban, Dan, I don't know, whatever is there. Why do they do it? Because they can then create those they called rhymes, and people can actually use them for funny things like hen and when, right? So why people do that, and you can actually show them other resources or make them available for children to actually see how particular texts use the concept of the rhyme and how particular texts don't use the concept of the rhyme. Now, when children can't read yet, or not much, you can read it with them. So, or you can click on the button of a hen, and the hen is reading. So you can use YouTube, or you can use your own voice to actually record the written text. There are no softwares that I know of it other than the ones that privately created.
So, sorry, Anya, I was just a little bit baffled about it. So the what, why, and how can be used in any context. In this instance, the what people do is where we're looking at rhymes. People rhyme, and the why people do that for making funny rhymes, for entertainment,
yeah.
and how people do it. Then you go in to explore what actual words are used to create the rhyme.
Yes, but this is because it's a lesson 1. I don't go too much detail. This is just to engage them, get them interested. And I can use the same structure. Yes, but that's true. Yes, exactly that.
Okay, so the what people do is your broad opening to your initial look at the topic, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No.
Now, when you do actually the why people do it, when you actually create this, when you show them that people create rhyming phrases, you can use a game again, or you can read the text yourself, or you can use the YouTube or something. It wouldn't harm to compare it with other texts for children to actually see that not all texts have rhymes. you can see that if you actually explore a rhyme in terms of what texts have a rhyme and what texts don't have rhyme, it's just going to take the entire 45 minutes. Just playing the game, you see, it's the whole thing. And then the kids will say to you they want to do, but I don't know how, in different classes are done differently. Sometimes the lesson is 45 minutes, sometimes you can have actually 2 consecutive classes. So it will be 45 minutes twice in a row. So you could actually follow it up, and you will see I am in love lately. Lately I'm in love with taxonomies. So this is what Sharon was talking about, and I have to leave it for later. But, you know, just little things, when and hand. It doesn't mean that children will rely on it when they produce their own resources later on creatively. But it doesn't harm to have some when and hen, or sun and done, or something, whatever there. Because it is just about creating regularities and putting things in clusters, so the children start developing a concept of organization. And if you remember that I always have in mind dyslexic children, or children who organize things differently, those taxonomies enable children to start thinking of organization. We probably will be kicked out by this system any minute. So then what did I have here? This was my original lesson 1, but I added the hen and when, just for the fun of it, just for contrast for you to look. You can see that people create different texts. People use different, so you know, not different. This is still lesson 1, no different than the one about the ducks or about the hen here. But I don't know, some other way of introducing children to have fun. Why people use text for information signage. So you can use resources and so on to actually make it fun, so the children can explore. People can click, they can explore different texts that are actually written in the form of book or newspaper, I don't know, whatever you have available to you. Or you can use the internet as well, or only, depends on you. So that's a lesson 1. It's actually giving children a bit of an idea that people create either rhymes, or then there are other. So if you actually do the rhymes here, so you can start with the rhyme, but you can broaden at the level of Y. Presently, I don't know what's happening. At the level of Y, you can actually broaden it and start showing that there are other texts. And it will be, after children done a lot of exploration, and in lesson 4, children might actually learn a book. But now they read it in an exploratory way. They can engage in the discussion, what's happening in that book, and so on. So it's very different. We might go into the detail next time. But it's very different. Why do reading the book, which is usually seen as the lesson 1, why read it lesson 4 and then have 5, 6 for students actually do the work, which is they do their own project and so on. And we still have activities helping them. But basically what I'm saying is, starting with the book when children don't see the purpose of reading this book, they're not actually familiarized, they're not engaged. The teacher comes and opens the book and reads the book. Why is the teacher reading? Because the teacher is, yes?
Sorry. Could it be worthwhile or pointless to read the book at the lesson 1 and then revisit the book in lesson 4 and try and identify, you know, what we found now?
Stacey, I would never say no. I would never say no, because I would not know yet. But what would be worthwhile to see is how this act of reading a book with students is an act of their engagement with the world, or of their what I want them to do is approach the book. When you read the book, I want them to know I want them to know why they are doing that. They have to be engaged. We can actually start maybe with the book and see how we can work with it. We might do the detail work and these questions, we might cover those detailed questions next time. For today, I really wanted us to just have a concept of pedagogy and the way how to work with the curriculum, and reinforce the idea that literacy is communication. Therefore, it would be good to organize our lessons around questions. which are based in communications, would teach us about what people do and why do they do it and how do they do it, and then in that sense children engage in literacy as a communicative act, not as I don't know, skill of learning, acquiring a skill of differentiating between letters or words or forms that teachers identify as relevant. Okay, Sharon. These are all great ideas, and everybody has great ideas. And I think that we should. What I did suggest is, after you finish if you look at the end of this PowerPoint, I think we should. What would be worthwhile if we actually got started doing things online, like the one that Sharon said. You know, maybe we should start with a book and do something like this, or we should start with a book and do something else. Now, I think we should put these things online, and we should actually start sharing ideas about creating a lesson plan, and I think and how we will go about actually engaging children in some exploratory activities. I think all of this, there's room for it on the discussion board. But before you have firm ideas what to do, look into the curriculum, decide on some profile or on some theme of your lesson plans, or right, what you would like to teach, what you would like to make children aware. Like for me, I had text as emotion, children exploring the text as an emotion and deciding exactly on what kind of text they want to create for what kinds of emotions, and so on. I don't know, children creating poems or children creating news websites and so on. Whatever it is, decide first on that larger project, on the larger theme, then look into the concepts of what, why, and how, then look how the lower order skills can feed into those lessons, and then think from then on how to actually divide your lesson sequences. That would be a better way, because you are working then with the curriculum as a tool which can help you with creating ideas for activities. Not just curriculum for creating assessment activities, but also for teaching, because the idea is also, the question is, we can assess, but did we teach well? So in order to teach well, we have to create activities which are based on the outcomes identified in the curriculum. And in order to teach those outcomes, we need to actually create activities that enable students to compare and contrast. We should explore and evaluate. We should explore the curriculum. We should explore the curriculum.
That was in reference. That was in reference to you saying we should put it online and just on our Learn line. That's all that was.
Just for the yes, as a learning tool. So someone like hey, yeah.
I was just being silly with that comment when you said that we should put it on the question and answer board, the discussion board. I was just being silly.
For exploring and evaluating, which is what I'm teaching. This is what
each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very funny. Yeah, exactly. That's the idea. Now, the most important things in lesson design is to facilitate activities for exploration and evaluation. That is very much true. And for using curriculum using curriculum really to the exhaustion, which means really make use of those higher order skills and really make use out of those lower order skills. And if you do that, your lesson design will never be perfect, but it will be richly informed. And that's the idea of a good lesson plan. If it is richly informed, you're flying. If it is all about drilling, then it's not actually addressing anything that the curriculum would want us to do. And a good pedagogy, and that's it. That's the secret of a good planning. Does anybody of you make any use out of those YouTube things that I produce?
Yes.
Yeah, I try to make it sweet and short and whatever, just to help, because sometimes some students can't access those recordings from LearnLine, so I try to actually diversify access. Okay, well, we might finish now for now, because we're pretty clear about the general pointers, the general structure of lesson design, the things that should inform our lesson design. Everything else we will discuss later on, and we will look at them in detail, maybe lesson by lesson.
When are we looking at having the next LearnLine? When might that be?
Well, shouldn't it be like next week? What do you think? Or would you like earlier?
Perfect.
Next week? Okay. Well,
no,
next Monday?
Suits me, if it suits everyone else.
So next Monday, 5 p.m. Because assignment one, most of the students are pretty much done with it. Yeah, and then we're just going to learn a couple of tricks using lesson 1 or lesson 2, and then we will be flying, and assignment 2 will be finished. A lot of tricks that are needed for literacy teaching, good literacy teaching, we can cover very quickly. We've covered the sort of overall thing, and now we can go into detail of those exploration and evaluation stuff. All right, guys, I'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, everyone.